What was something you saw you were definitely not supposed to see?
I found my dad's will. I was on his computer while he was at work, actually searching for his porn, and ended up finding a strangely titled Word document. At first it didn't seem like a big deal. It contained a note to each of his kids. It wasn't until I got to the last one, my youngest brother, that I realized it wasn't just a will. The start of that line read something along the lines of, "If anything is going to make me change my mind now, it's writing this part." I realized I had found my dad's suicide note. I was about 14 or 15 at the time and I had no idea how to go about talking to him about it. I decided to just keep it to myself. He started buying us gifts and stuff and I would get really scared and I still just kept it to myself. I remember one day on the weekend I woke up in my bed to a loud bang coming from my dad's room. I laid there in bed for probably half an hour frozen. Once I worked up the strength, I went to his room and opened the door. He wasn't in the bedroom. I was so confused until I saw that the bedroom window was open. What had happened is that there was a gust and the wind had slammed the door shut, but my paranoid brain had heard a gunshot. After that I was laughing hysterically and I don't have much memory of the day past that. Shortly after this incident, my dad had returned most of the gifts he bought us kids and I slowly started to believe that he had changed his mind. I never confronted him about it until last year, about 14 years or so later, but I never fully accepted that he was okay now. I called him distraught about a separate matter and he started talking to me about depression. He told me on his own about he had considered taking his life, and went into detail about it, and all I could do was cry and tell him, I know. We talked a lot longer after that and we were finally able to put it all to rest.
When I was 8 or so, my old nanny, babysitter, choose which you prefer, was showing me a video of her time with her boyfriend in Paris. After it blacks out for a few seconds, it then suddenly cuts to her lying on her hotel bed completely naked, legs spread, telling her boyfriend to come get it. She jumped out of her seat, tried to cover my eyes and told me to never tell anyone. I have now told potentially thousands of random strangers.
My dad once handed me his tablet and suggested I look at an ebook or something, while we were sitting around in a theater waiting for a play to start. I don't know if I misunderstood him or what, because when I brought up his Amazon Reader app, I saw that the last book he had been reading was How to Deal with a Sexless Marriage or something along those lines. Dad was very embarrassed, quickly took the tablet back, and we did not speak of what had just transpired. Another time, Dad handed me his phone and asked me to look up something for him, while we were sitting around the living room at a family get-together. When I opened his browser app, the last page open was porn. The video began autoplaying and I frantically tried to figure out how to close the tab, but all I really managed to do was look at the video for far longer than I wanted to. So I shoved the phone back at my dad and said, "Ya need to close the theater, but can't figure out how. I'm sorry," and we once again did not speak of what had just transpired. There were also another couple of times where I went to use his computer and there was either a bunch of porn open in his browser or some kind of porn in the CD tray. Dad is a bit absent-minded. Edit, to maybe clear up some confusion, I'm not listing this stuff in the order it happened. First, things were running across porn on or in his computer while he wasn't around, then the ebook thing, then the porn on his phone. After that, nothing's happened. He's not trying to suggest anything, he's just distractible and forgetful.
I was about 8 or 9 and my parents were going to be out of town, so they had me and siblings stay with a family from our church. Once we got to the house, which was really nice by the way, they had one rule: you can play wherever you want but the basement is off limits. Me being the little bastard that I was, snuck down there first chance I got and was supremely disappointed to only find rows and rows of plants growing under lights.
My boss forwarded me an email telling me to do something. I noticed the email chain had his bosses on it, so I read through the chain. They had asked him to rate all my coworkers and I from best to worst earlier in the conversation.
Back in middle school, we had this really strange gym teacher about 6'2" and ripped. Me and my friend were going to take a dump and thought that the locker room toilets would be clean since no one used them throughout the day. When we walked in, to our left was one big shower room and there was our gym teacher showering while eating spaghetti out of a Tupperware container. Thank God he was wearing swim trunks, but he turned around and said, "You guys aren't supposed to be here," so we left. Growing up with my little brother and single mum, we never had a lot, but she made sure we always had a safe and decent place to live and there was always food on the table. She never really ate much. I remember dinners of baked chicken, beef stew, salmon. It was a lot cheaper a million years ago. Good food, nothing terribly extravagant, but always nutritious, yet she barely ever ate. When I was 10 I saw her eating PB&J on crackers in her room after dinner. That's when I realized there was never enough food for all three of us. She would cook what we had for my brother and I, and she would eat the bare minimum, always out of sight, so that my brother and I wouldn't worry about the actual level of poverty we were at. I never asked for another material thing from her after that night.
More heard than seen, but I was golfing with my mother's fiancé when he got a phone call. He had his cell volume turned up really high, and I overheard a woman who wasn't my mother say some things, including the phrase, "fuck and suck," in a seductive manner. I convinced myself that it wasn't my business or that I'd misunderstood, and dropped it. A few years later, her now husband was revealed to be a serial cheater, with active partners numbering in the dozens. Yes, I still feel like shit. Yes, they're divorced.
When I was younger, my family went to look round a house we were considering buying. Went into the owner's daughter's room and there was a blow-up sex doll on the floor. It was really funny, but we didn't end up buying the house.
I was working the night shift doing post-production on a well-known reality show. I walked into the men's room and found out lady boss bent over the sink getting fucked by one of the other night guys. They both looked up, we made eye contact in the mirror, and I closed the door without a word. I never brought it up, but she gave me the next night off. For all your hard work. Not me, but a co-worker several months before I started at the company. Big boss man comes back from a site visit weekend at his cabin not too far from site. Has someone burn all photos from his camera to a CD and makes a couple of copies. One copy is with my co-worker and another guy looking at photos from site. Suddenly the photos of the site trip ends and there are topless photos of Big Boss Man's wife at their cabin on the disc. But wait, there's a twist. Another copy of the same set of photos was currently in the boardroom PC where Big Boss Man is showing photos to the client. My co-worker doesn't know what to do, tells our lead administrative assistant. She confidently marches into the boardroom and ejects the disc, interrupting the meeting. Big Boss Man asks, "What are you doing?" She simply says, "There's a problem with the disc," and leaves. Edit, everyone is praising the AA with bigger balls than anyone else. Yes, she's amazing, and no, she never got in trouble. She was the second employee that was hired when Big Boss Man started the company 2 decades ago. This event happened almost 9 years ago now, and she's still an indispensable employee. My coworker who unexpectedly saw the boobs never heard what happened after that. Nobody talked about it and everyone just carried on like it never happened.
Alright, here it goes. I was in the 7th grade, so I was almost 12. I woke up in the middle of the night and I heard my mom screaming. I jump up and get ready to defend my mom. I open up my parents' bedroom door and my mom was definitely not in trouble. My dad was taking her from the behind. I didn't understand it at the time, but I wanted to get out of there before they noticed me. However, I fainted instead. That, my friends, is something I was definitely not supposed to see. Forever scarred. I'm 25 now and my dad still likes to bring it up at Christmas dinner.
I used to do a little work after school at a local comic shop. One day after school I was bagging comics when the owner's buddy came in. Look at these. Came out great. He had a stack of glossy amateur porn, featuring the shop owner, his buddy, and the owner's wife fucking. He laid them out all over the counter and they started pawing through the stack excitedly. From what I could see, it looked like the three of them enjoyed one another's company equally and vigorously. Then they noticed I was there. I got sent home early with a stack of free comics.
I was bartending and it was slow. I was putting away glasses by the only 2 people sitting at the bar. They seemed a new couple, very touchy, etc. At some point I noticed that she was wearing a wedding ring and he was not. Right as the music died down between songs, he turned to her and said, "You know, they're going to ask you where you were when he drowned." Mopped out of there real damn quick. Edit, this was 5 years ago now, but from what I remember they definitely knew I heard them. I was like 2 feet away. I froze for a second and then turned and went straight into the kitchen. I was freaking out with the kitchen staff and trying to figure out what to do. When I came back out they had paid cash and left. I debated calling the police, but had no other info besides what I thought I heard. I freaked out for a few days. Never heard anything about anyone drowning. I didn't keep it a secret either, I have told this story a lot. And this was a small town where people have nothing better to do than talk, so if there was a scandal, it was common knowledge what I had heard.
I was driving from West Berlin to West Germany in the late 1980s. My BF gives me wrong instructions, so I have to take an exit off the Autobahn to turn back and get back to the correct exit. On the small country road on which we found ourselves, we see a large truck with a missile on it, surrounded by Russian soldiers. They were as surprised as we were, but just laughed and waved at us, as we got the hell out of there as quickly as possible. Walking in on my cousins railing each other. Now I understand why they were close at Thanksgiving.
Saw a Homer Simpson keychain in my mum's desk drawer. Didn't say anything. 2 weeks later it's in my Christmas stocking and she goes, "Wow, how did Santa know how much you like The Simpsons?" That's how I figured out Santa must have been sleeping with my mum.
Went to a coworker's house to help get the scanner to work, which hasn't worked since her daughter had tried to use it a few days earlier. I tried to load the software, which would hang while trying to connect to the scanner. A quick power cycle of the scanner, and the software loaded. The software defaulted to the recent scans screen. The most recent scan was the genitalia of my coworker, her daughter, or I suppose it could have been a page from a XXX magazine that just happened to be exactly what you'd see if you were squatting over a scanner. My hotkey skills were fast, so I may have Alt plus F4D before she saw what I did, but once that software worked, I used a different program to perform a test scan. Easy, but uncomfortable way to earn $20.
Late to this one, but I once walked into my dad's van while he was balls deep into a woman who was not my mom. Dad had a drinking problem. Mom took me and my brother to go looking for him because he was supposed to be buying Christmas presents. Found his van at a bar. Mom sent me to look inside the van to see if there were presents in there. Looked back into the back and saw my dad's bare ass as he was plowing some chick. He turned over his shoulder and looked right at me and said in the most evil voice, "Get out." This was 20 plus years ago now and I still get emotional thinking about it. I still remember the entire thing so clearly.
Caught someone eating a booger while sitting in his car. We made eye contact. He had the 1,000-yard stare. He knew what I had witnessed.
I was helping Mill cleaning out her closet. All was jokes and laughter until I pull out an unopened massive dildo. We were both paralyzed for a moment before she slowly took it out of my hands and mumbled something about the dildo not being what she thought it would be like and that she ordered it online. She then backed out of the room and threw it in a cupboard. We then proceeded to clean the rest of the closet. I desperately wanted to tell So about this awkward event but decided to spare him.
Consider subscribing.